We're glad to have you.
Glad to have you.
Thanks for hanging in there with technical difficulties. All right, let's call the meeting to order at 6:17. Thank you all for your patience. And congratulations, we've made it to meeting number 50. How about that? Regular meeting number 50. We have old business approval of minutes from August 24th. I had one little typo on the very last page, just the name of the person from the public there, I think needed to be
Marshall.
Marshall. Anybody else have any corrections to the minutes?
Yeah, there was also a correction on item number 2. Third line, it should say notice to proceed. It said notice to process.
Very good. Any other corrections? If not, how about a motion to accept as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Bob and seconded by the other Bob. All in favor, please raise your hands. Or say aye if you're on the phone. I'm not getting a hand count here. Again, please raise your hands.
Don't know what Jesse's doing.
All opposed. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right. So new business. Let's start with TSKP. We've got Deanna and Richard. Welcome.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be with you again. We just wanted to talk about 4 items to give you an update. I'll mention 3 of them and Deanna will handle the 4th. First of all, I want to follow up on a question or a comment made by Bob Berman at the last committee meeting regarding the roof drains. I believe he said that he recommended that we have roof drains that were greater than 4 inches in diameter because of a problem that had occurred at, I believe, at the community center. And so we've looked at that, but the next size up would be a 6-inch roof drain. Our engineers feel that a 4-inch drain is adequate. We would like to proceed with a 4-inch drain. I did reach out to Downs, or Deanna reached out to Downs to find out more about what the problem was at the community center. And we did get a response from Scott that there was an apparent blockage in that facility, which was cleared. Scott, if I could ask you to comment on that.
Yeah, Bob, I know you had some concerns when Human Services came about with some flooding on the roof, but that was very early on after turnover, and it was discovered that there was some construction debris blockage. I went back over with Jason in regards to that. So that, we never really had any flooding after that on that roof ever, or any complaints on it. I know there were a lot of rain garden issues that we went through that kind of backed up, and there were some issues with that construction, but we did get through that as well. But going to a 6-inch drain is pretty big and can lead to some issues with coordination and MEP and trying to get through the structure.
Exactly, and that's why I bring it up. I think there's an additional cost for the 6-inch pipe. You don't really need it. In fact, according to our engineer's calculations, some of the pipes could be 2 inches. I'm not advocating 2 inches. I'm saying 4 inches would be more than ample. And so that's what would be my recommendation and my response to Bob. So unless the committee has any objections, we would like to proceed on that basis.
My only concern, as I've said, is I'm concerned about what's called a 50-year rain. When you get, say, 7 or 8 inches in a matter of 2 or 3 hours, which we did get twice. And first 2 years at 330 was open. And if a 4-inch can handle that, that's fine with me. My
Okay.
concern is to make sure that we don't have any issues.
Okay,
We are
Again,
likely to start getting more and more of those kinds of rains. There's evidence this past week.
yes, it was quite torrential this week. I will ask our engineers to reconfirm it. And if they do reconfirm it, I can get an email or a response in writing from them. But that was their initial recommendation. And even though they did calculate that some of them could be 2, I told them, no, we're not doing anything smaller than 4.
Okay.
But I'll ask them to confirm in writing.
That's what my whole concern is. That's fine.
Okay, thanks. So that's the first item. The second is a commissioning agent. Hopefully, the committee will be prepared to issue a RFP for a commissioning agent. That is a requirement for lead certification. And we were reminded by the lead specialist, Cynthia Kaplan, that commissioning agent needs to be in place by when we get into construction documents.
Yes.
So that means after October the 6th, when we'll start proceeding with construction documents. Hopefully we can get somebody on board, maybe by November, if you could, that would be wonderful. And then we have also the third item I wanted to mention was the Mdc encroachment. We are pursuing that with SLR. SLR, our civil engineer, will be spearheading that effort. The encroachments we are talking about are the pedestrian bridge over the Mdc right-of-way, the movement of earth on that right-of-way, the potential foundation that's immediately adjacent to the Mdc right-of-way. Those are the items that we're going to be approaching the Mdc on the encroachment permit. And then it'll probably be a 3-month process of their reviews. So that's going to be proceeding. There is a fee associated with that, an application fee, which I believe that was communicated with Nancy. That's I'm sorry, it's part of the process. Everybody has to collect their toll if you go through their area. So that's the last update I wanted to give the building committee.
Nancy, we're going to take action on that MDC fee later in the meeting, or you want to do it now?
No, we can do it later when you take care of other things. I just want to then turn it over to Deanna, if I can ask her to give you an update on the lead score sheet. We've had 2 lead meetings with the lead consultant. The first one had to do with the mechanical systems. That was last week. And then earlier this week, we did the score sheet for the site civil. So if she could share her screen and give you the bottom line, we'll tell you where we are.
So what we wanted to kind of update everybody is on the progress on the lead in the lead process for both libraries. We had a couple of meetings with Cynthia Kaplan and with the design team and some of the members of the building committee. One was for specific for MEP items, and the one that happened on yesterday was for site and landscape. I'm sharing my screen. I have the whole document that Cynthia sent us with the most updated information. There is a lot of information. Each meeting was around 2 hours. So I am sharing with you kind of the bottom, the summary of each building. The one I have here is the score, the score points that we have for McMahon. As you can see right now, we have definitely 21 points and potential 41. So everybody is aware that we need to get at least 50 points to meet the LEED silver certification. And as you can see, there are 51 points that are definitely a no. Now, regarding Prosser Library, also I'm sharing, I have the whole document, but I'm sharing the summary. And as you can see here, we have a 23 points as yes, and I would say around 41 points that would be very possible to get, and 47 points as a no. That's kind of the update that we wanted to give everybody about where we are with LEED, and all this information is, we're communicating with our consultants, so everybody's in the loop about what are actions we need to take.
Okay, Lois.
Thanks. I have two questions. I read the letter from the MDC, and it made me quite concerned about the timing of getting all of those approvals. Are you concerned about that?
Well, I'm a worrier, so I'm always concerned about everything. So yes, we're going to try to move this along just as quickly as we can. The 3-month review period is something that was reported to us when we met with the MDC personnel. Can you tell me more about what you read that concerns you?
Oh, it just sounded like there were many steps and many approvals, and I didn't know how far we could go until we have those approvals in terms of construction.
Well, we can't really encroach on the MDC until we have those approvals. However, they made it sound like actual access over the MDC right away is not an issue. So paving is something that they don't consider to be a permanent encroachment. And so we don't believe that the pavement is going to be an issue. Regarding the foundation adjacent to the MDC, we've been reviewing that with our structural engineer. We're going to have a eccentric foundation there, meaning that the footing is going to be not central under the wall, but eccentric. And that is certainly achievable. Our engineers have done that before. The trick is to try to, we're going to present to MDC a couple of options. One is regular excavation to a regular footing. And that would mean we would have a temporary cutting of the earth in the MDC right away to get the conventional foundation in the conventional manner. Should that fail, we have an alternative strategy, which is to create some piles adjacent to the MDC right away without actually encroaching onto the MDC right away. Either technique could work, but removing the earth for the conventional footing, we just need to review that with MDC.
It wasn't the detail of what you were planning to do so much as getting their attention and pointing out what our schedule is and trying to make it all go together. And I wondered whether, I know the town has a representative to MDC. I know that we sit on the MDC council. I'm just wondering if there is a way to bring attention to the project such that we won't be held back by the regular flow of work in the MDC office.
I really appreciate that comment. And if there are folks in the Bloomfield community, either sit on the board or represented the town on the MDC, that could certainly be helpful. If you could give me their names, we could make sure that when we make the submission to MDC, we copy those people in on the correspondence just to keep them up to date. And yet anything that could be done to get us to the top of the pile for their review, I think would be a good strategy.
And I think it would be helpful to lay out for them what our schedule is.
I agree. I agree.
My second question has to do with the LEED. The work on that has been very helpful for me and informative. I'm wondering whether part of Cynthia's work includes coming out actually to look at the site. Because I was surprised yesterday when we were talking about the population base, particularly close to Prosser, that her assumption was that we did not have the necessary population base. So I'm wondering if she's been out here to look and see, or if it's even her role to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if she's been out there, quite frankly.
I'm not sure if Scott or Downs have any comments on that, because you work with Cynthia, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that she's been out there yet, Lois. She actually does visit the construction site when we're under construction, for certain periods of time, never mind reviewing the documents as they flow through. That's something I can talk about with her.
Thank you.
I do remember, Lois, one more point. I do remember in the first meeting we had with her last week, in which we talked about some of these points that she was encouraging us to try to get, even though they're pilot, it's a pilot program. And one of them was the community outreach, the community involvement. And I believe she was told that there was some survey information from the community that might be helpful in documenting what was done to
Yes,
get that.
Elizabeth has given her all of that.
Okay,
So she has it. It was just a question of how many housing units are there. And there were considerable points associated with that. And her impression was maybe she was thinking more about McMahon than about Prosser, but she didn't know that piece of information.
we'll follow up. We'll follow up with her.
Thank you.
Other questions for TSKP? I don't see any hands. All right, so thanks, Richard and Deanna. Let's go on to update from Downs. And we've got Scott and Kyle and Tom.
Yep. Can everyone see?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So this agenda hasn't changed that much since the last time we met, because this has the updates for the schedule that we're coming up to. So we're still striving to get to, well, the design team is looking to get to the 7th for design documents, and that's the date that we're currently looking at. And everything else just kind of follows through with your bidding and scheduling updates and your construction schedule updates. And Lois, I know you have your concerns about the MDC. And I believe they had said it was about a 90-day review process or sooner, which, you always do the worst case scenario. I mean, as soon as the application goes in, still think we have time. Once the application is in, we're okay. Maybe we're hitting at the end of December, but we're not bidding until, second week of January. So I think we'll be all right, as long as we don't have any hiccups, of course, but we'll see where it takes us. As far as lead, Richard, Deanna updated everybody on lead. So Cynthia has developed those matrix spreadsheets, and they're going to continue on those week to week and keep it moving forward with the design team and the specifications and getting them outlined. For site logistics, Kyle has put together 2 plans one for each library for site logistics for the project. And what site logistics is for us as a construction manager, it's how we show the subcontractors where everything is going to go when you come on site, as far as where the fencing is going, where our trailer is going to be, where we're looking for temporary power to come in and feed the building so that they understand what they need to provide and where everything is. So I'll start with, looks like I have McMahon here. Kyle, you want to talk about it?
Yep, I'll run through it. Good evening, everyone. As you can see, this is just our draft plan here. This will change as we continue to progress through design and get closer to construction, but this is what we have so far. So looking at McMahon Wintonberry, we're going to have an 8-foot fence around the whole site. It's going to be post driven into the ground, so it won't be that loose temporary fencing with the weights that hold it in place on the bottom. We'll have a scrim around the whole fence as well, so there'll be a little bit of privacy on the site, and it'll also help a little bit with dust control throughout the project. So we're going to utilize those 2 existing driveway cutouts there for our gates, which will also have tracking pads for trucks and traffic in and out of the site, so we don't track dirt onto the public roadways. We will have road cleaning if we do make the roads dirty. It just depends on how it goes through the project, but we do maintain that as well. So the parking lot you see there is going to remain in place at this point. We're gonna mill it and repave it, but the limits of the lot will remain the same. Then off to the left there, when in the yard, we're going to use that as our staging area, any stockpiling, material laydown and storage, and potentially contractor parking throughout the job. And over there as well, we have our DCC field office tucked into the corner there. And right now we're thinking of pulling the temporary power in from the poles that are across the street there, tie that into our trailer, and then bring it over to the building as needed for the renovation and the addition. And again, here on the right side, we've got that memorial tree identified, which will be salvaged and relocated on site somewhere, wherever the contract documents dictate and we decide on that. I don't believe that's been decided yet. So, general overview of McMahon here. In the top right, we have a sign key as well, just our typical signage on site. Danger construction site, hard hat area, eye protection, smoke-free workplace, etc. And these will be posted on the fence that goes around the site for any public walking by and for workers as well. So I guess I'll take any questions on McMahon before we jump over to Prosser.
Any questions? No, it looks like we're good, Kyle.
I have a question.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, go back to the McMahon site. So are you cutting into Rockwell for utilities? I know you said you're going to bring in power from across the street. I guess that would be overhead. But
Yeah, the temp power would be overhead.
Utilities.
We still have to get the permanent utilities on here and lay that out exactly how it's going to go, if that's what you're asking about, Richard.
Well, I'm looking at the pavement on
Yep.
Rockwell Avenue, and I'm wondering whether the town has any plans to repave Rockwell. I would hate for them to pave before you get into construction. It would be better if they paved afterwards. So it would be a pity to cut into that pavement for utility connections if they were to pave that street beforehand. So I would encourage some communication with whoever is responsible for street pavement in the town of Bloomfield.
We'll do that, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, that was my only comment. Thanks for sharing this. I think this is very helpful.
Sure thing. And as we go, as things change, we'll update this periodically as well to the group here.
Yeah.
All right. This site's a little bigger, so we're a little farther zoomed out, but we got Prosser here, the proposed new building located where the existing building is. We're gonna have that site fenced in as its own entity with 2 gates where the existing driveways are, one up on the northeast corner and one on the south, again with our tracking pads. And then over on the Riley site, we are going to fence that area in separately with a gate as well, where we're going to house our DCC field office and potentially any subcontractor field offices. We got that right there in the bottom left corner. And of course, that building is going to be going away. We've laid out the proposed new parking lot as of the last design that we've published. So that might change, but that's what we have right now. And we're going to utilize that side of the site for any of our staging, stockpiling, laydown, storage, etc., and parking. It'll change throughout the job, whether we use all the site or part of it, because obviously we have demo to do over there and then a new parking lot to construct. So that'll be coordinated throughout the job. And not sure yet where we're going to pull our temporary power from, if it's just going to come over on one part of the job here on Riley, or if we're gonna pull it in 2 spots from Riley and Prosser instead of running it all the way overhead from our trailer. So we got a little more coordination to do on that front, but we'll continue to do that. And then last note here, the bottom in green there, we're gonna have the contractor be aware and responsible for any traffic control measures as we transport material from Riley to the Prosser, the new building site. Because that is a busy area and we want to make sure we do things correctly without causing issues. So that's just a side note there that we're aware of and we're coordinating. Any questions on this one?
Questions for Kyle? Okay, I don't see any. All right, thanks, Kyle.
Awesome, thank you.
We're going back to Scott here.
That about wraps it up, Mark.
Okay, so other questions for Downs on anything else? Elizabeth?
I had a question about the scrim. Am I saying it right? The scrim, and if we'd be able to personalize it in any way. I know I've seen other library projects do that. And when will we have to get started on that, if that is the case?
You can personalize it. I would caution how much or how much of it you want to personalize, because it can get very expensive. But yeah, we've certainly done that before. I know at the Park Street Library, we did that. And they actually had pictures of kids that were in the library along the scrim itself. But just want to keep that in mind. It's expensive, but it can be done. Sometimes we do certain sections, near the gates where you drive by, or, but it all depends.
So Scott, what the timing on that? We're probably a month or so before we're ready to mobilize.
Yeah, I mean, it would be something we would want to talk about this fall for ideas, Elizabeth, that you have, and where you would want to go with it. But we would want to have something by December for sure.
Bob Berman?
Yeah, my only comment is that we already have a tight budget. So we need to be careful what additional expenses we're going to add that aren't already planned for. Because we've already had a couple of surprises and we really don't need many more.
Any other questions for Downs? All right, I thank you. Let's go on to Chip from Colliers.
Good evening, everyone. Bob and I met over at Meyer Storage the other day to look at what type of storage they have. As you may recall, they are on state contract, and the town also has a relationship with them. As we we're talking about storage before, there was a desire for climate controlled storage as well as accessible storage. Accessible storage is difficult. These are not self-storage units. It's a big warehouse. If you picture the end of Indiana Jones, that's kind of what it's like. They're 30 feet high, shelving, and a couple 100 feet long. So the storage needs to be very well documented. If they're going to, anything that's going to be accessed, you need to send a request in, and then they'll bring it out, or even can deliver it. So that's one of the things to be thinking about as far as storage. If there is going to need to be storage that's relatively accessible, we're going to need to look for different options than Meyer. Pricing is per cubic foot. I don't have a sense of what that pricing is now. They suggested setting up some time to come. Once you're have an understanding of how much and what you're looking to store, they'll come out and take a look at it and offer some suggestions. And then the other thing is they actually do also, they're on state contract for move services and have a whole library division for packing and moving and storing library materials. So that's something that's good to know. Any questions?
Questions for Chip? No, I think we're good.
All right, so the big thing is we really do need to get a handle on what you're looking to store, what is going to be in climate controlled and what is not going to be. Furniture would be on pallets and placed again a similar storage, where it's accessed by by the Meyer folks in order to properly store that, and again, you just can't really get to it if you need to. And so we'll need to know all of that stuff. As far as the commissioning agent, they'll be putting together the RFP. Nancy, I know you mentioned that there was a RFP that the town has used before. We've got a sample that TKSP sent. We have our own, but I think I do want to try to use the towns as a base in order to make sure that we're being consistent with what's happened there before. So I don't know if you've been able to pull that together, Nancy, or not.
I hadn't, but the more I think about it, yes, we can use that. But that was not a LEED certified project. So there's quite a bit of difference between a LEED certified and a non-LEED certified one. So we'll have to get together and compare notes. And
yeah, the scope is easy to do. It's kind of the other town requirements that I want to pull off of that.
Sure.
And I saw that our lead energy modeler provided us with an RFP as well. I thought I saw that in an email going through.
Yeah, I thought that was from TKSP, but maybe it was from them. Or
Somebody
maybe it was
sent one.
around through, but yes, we have one
We sent
that has come through.
TSKP sent it, but it was originally from our energy modeler, Joe. So yeah, it was from him and us, really.
Right,
Right.
and that had the lead requirements in there,
Yep.
as I understand it, so.
Yep.
Okay. All right, questions for Chip? All right, thanks, Chip.
All right. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is the McMahon State Library Construction Grant. It is on the agenda for town council to take action on Monday to move forward with that. So I wanted to make sure that this committee sends whatever message we need to send to the council when they take action on Monday. We had originally in our discussions said that we would not pursue the grant because it looked like it wouldn't jive with our schedule, and any delay in the schedule would cost us money rather than save us money. However, we've gotten some new information, not only regarding the possibility of that schedule speeding up somehow, but also the idea that if we do not meet our schedule and choose to reject a grant that is given to us because of that, it would be okay with the State Library Board for us to do that because they had some towns that backed off of going for the grant. Originally, they frowned on us backing out of something we applied for. So at the moment, I know Elizabeth and staff have put together and submitted application and are continuing to do so with more information that's requested. But like I said, the town council needs to take action on this on Monday. I was hoping that this body here will make it clear to the town council that should the grant not be available in a timely fashion to meet our schedule, it would actually cost us more money to accept it than to take it. So I think that message needs to be sent on Monday to the council so they understand that. perhaps we can, is that clear to people? You know, we've kind of been over it many times. We never took a formal vote on it, but that was the consensus we had come to relative to whether the money helps us or hurts us in the long run. So that's where I believe we stand now, that if we don't get the money when we need it to sign that contract with the state, which was done for Prosser in April of this year, if that was a repeat, that would not help us out. If we can get it done earlier, it would help us out. That's the first layer of this complicated thing. The other layer is, if everything goes great, we're awarded the money, we get it in a timely fashion, we can do both projects at the same time. The money comes in lieu of money that we're borrowing, okay? Unless the town council takes action, as they did with Prosser, to say the money would be in addition to what the voters have approved. So there's that leg of this to follow. So we don't know where that stands either. I think all that depends on whether we get the CIF grant, you know, how that goes. So there's complications here. There's unknowns afterwards as well. But at this point, I'd like to entertain some kind of a motion for what we want to be telling the town council in terms of that we may reject this if given the money, if it's not given in a timely fashion. Lois, you have your hand up.
Yes, Mark, I read the documentation from the library board, I guess, to you, Elizabeth, with respect to the grant. And I was looking for the statement that would say, if you reject the grant, it's not going to hurt you. What I saw was a statement that said, there is room for you to be funded this year because others have not pursued it. That piece I understood, but I didn't gather from there that it meant that there wouldn't be a black mark against us if we pursued it and then didn't take it. So I'm curious to know where that analysis came from.
Elizabeth?
Yes, so that is coming from the state library themselves. As Chair Wiseman said, originally it was a little bit more wishy-washy, but when push came to shove, they had less applicants than they were expecting. So that pool of money is not going to be as competitive as previously thought.
I understood that, but the piece that I didn't understand was the suggestion that if we do apply and we are accepted and then we refuse the grant, it may hurt our credibility or our image or something. I didn't see anything like that in writing.
When we spoke with her on the phone, we did talk about that. And that is why she amended that paragraph in that email. If you would like Lois to put something more exact in terms of your question, we could forward it along to have her, Maria Bernier, respond again formally.
I think it would be very helpful to the town council as they consider this to know whether or not it's going to hurt the town because we cannot take the grant even if we get it. If it's going to slow us down and cost us more money, that would be irresponsible for the town. So I would like more assurance before proceeding.
So in terms of timing, the approval from town council needs to be by the end of September. Is that true, Elizabeth?
We're hoping to have all the documentation into the state library by next Friday. That's our soft goal.
And well, how does that relate to the council's action? Does that have to happen before the council's action? Are the two tied together, or is the council action, you're saying the council action is part of this next submission?
The council action is required by the end of the month, along with all the other documentation.
Okay. Now, so this Monday is the first of 2 meetings of the month for the council. I'm just thinking, you know, if we're looking to get clarification as Lois is suggesting, then possibly we'd be able to take this to the second meeting in September. I don't know. I'm throwing that out there as so we can work this out and see what we want to do. I see, Bob, you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little confused, and I have a question for Elizabeth. Where the authority to go ahead and submit a grant application came from, because the library board only authorized submitting a letter of intent just to hold as a placeholder. And this committee didn't give approval. I haven't seen anything where council gave approval. The library board hasn't met, so I don't see where they could have given approval. Where'd you get the authority to go ahead and submit this?
The grant was due and we had to turn it in. And as part of the grant process, it is required that the town council approve that. So if the town council does not approve that and by the end date, it's not an official grant application. So essentially the power is still with the town council.
But that doesn't answer the question of where the authority for you to even complete and submit it in the first place came from. That's the question. Where did you get the authority to go ahead and submit it, subject to council's ratification after the fact? Or did you do this on your own?
May I add something here, Mr. Chair?
No, well, actually, that's a question for Elizabeth or from Bob.
So again, the timeline for the grant was such that we had to submit it or we would not be able to. I know that we talked about this at both the library board as well as library building committee meetings. We were slow to make any formal recommendations with this body, but I know I speak on behalf of myself as director of the library that I would feel it irresponsible for that not to be submitted and have the chance of us missing out on $1 million from the state library when that money is specifically set aside for exactly what we're doing.
So in other words, you took it upon yourself to do it. That's what I hear you saying.
I mean, I'm really not sure how to answer that.
It's a simple question.
All right, let's Deputy Mayor Davis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The council, as you know, meets on next Monday. The following meeting, which I believe is going to take place on the 28th or the 27th, probably will not allow for anything outside of a prearranged agenda. So my recommendation is that we be prepared to act on this on the meeting coming up on Monday. And it's also my understanding that the application isn't official until the council approves it. I believe that the council will be prepared to approve it. And I would think that the chair of the library board would be a person who could illuminate and give some context to what the library is doing, because the library chair speaks on behalf of the library. So I thought that the AVA's opportunity to speak would shed some light on what the Board of Trustees is doing vis-a-vis the application to the state. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Yes, Ava, please.
The library board did discuss this. We encouraged Elizabeth to proceed with the first step since there was a time limit. The library director answers directly to the board as well as to the town manager, since we share responsibility for this direction according to the charter of this town. Since the application is not considered submitted or official, until the documentation includes approval from the town council, and the town council is the only approving body according to the directions for this grant, then the grant application doesn't exist until the supporting materials are submitted. There is no necessity for anyone else to approve this until that happens. If the council fails to approve the grant application, it will be withdrawn without prejudice. If the council approves it, it will go forward. The statutory responsibility here lies entirely with the council, so the decision is theirs. The library board supports Elizabeth in this effort, since it would be irresponsible for us as the elected body with regulatory power over certain aspects of the library to decide that we would not make every effort to provide this $1 million, since the taxpayers of the town would expect that of us. We promise to represent them as a whole, not any small faction thereof. So that is our responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Eva. And I think it's the responsibility of the building committee to make it clear to town council that we will recommend rejecting acceptance of this grant if it's going to, in effect, cost us more money. I think they need to understand that. I mean, we're all hoping we get it in a timely fashion, and it helps either the taxpayers or it's additional monies that we can spend, one or the other. So, I think it's important that this building committee take some action to decide what we are recommending to town council on Monday. Elizabeth?
I also wanted to add that the bond council has met the last 4 years, going back at least. I didn't go back any further. So there's a very strong chance that the bond council will again meet in December. And as that email from the state library outlined, there is a pathway to make sure that we are on the bond commission schedule to be approved for that $1 million. So again, I do think that it was in the best interest for us to move forward with this grant. And if it does impede us, I think the town council will know that, how to move. Again, the authority still lies with the town council.
Nancy?
Yes, I noticed on the schedule that Downs provided earlier that there were some early bid packages. And I don't know what impact those would have on the grant, because Scott or Kyle, if you can look, and when were you planning on sending out those early bid packages?
Well, I think we wanted to try to do that at the end of December. Again, it just depends how everything shakes out with CD documents. If we're able to do that. I mean, it may get out earlier, but it won't be too much later until the rest of the bid goes out, based on how everything has gone thus far.
So Scott, if we were to have the caveat with the town council that if it would have a negative impact on our bidding schedule, we might be able to withdraw if we don't hear by then, because we can't go out to bid, from what I understand, without approval of the grant.
Well, I mean, the way I read it, and I know I've talked with Elizabeth about this a few times, you can go to bid. You can do your scopes, you just can't do anything with that. It can't work, right? So.
Okay, but as long as we have an out, it shouldn't have a negative impact.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob Berman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind everybody that I believe it was in a June meeting, early July meeting, where Ava, representing the board trustees, said that she did not want the library people spending time preparing grant application. Man, they had other things on their plate that were more important. So that's why I get back to the same thing. I don't know where the authority to go ahead and spend all that time and do all that work and submit the paperwork application, even though technically it doesn't exist until council approves it. It's still, there was a deadline by which it had to be in, and all of a sudden it's in. And this board, and I suspect council, is learning about it after the fact. That disturbs me.
Yeah, well, I think we heard from Ava how the library board supports this. Ava?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had already mentioned this to this body previously, Bob. However, at one of our meetings, we discussed it as the library board. We are in fact a board. This is a committee that is meeting this evening. We decided at Elizabeth's recommendation that it would be good to do this. We did ask her if it would be an onerous business for her and the staff to do that. She indicated that despite the fact that they are spread this thin, they would be willing to do it, and in fact felt that it was something they should do because it would benefit the town. I would think that would also be something that this committee would wish to do. The bond committee meets in December. Elizabeth can give you that date. We would know by then whether or not the bond commission has met and whether or not the grant has been approved. The only permission Elizabeth needed to submit the unofficial beginning of this grant is from the library board. When the town council acts, the decision and the final decision is theirs. I am not hearing from the deputy mayor that this is a problem that he sees with the town council. I think the committee needs to proceed with whatever motion they choose to make. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ava. Would somebody like to make a motion? Lois? Are you muted?
You're muted.
I'm still trying to investigate this idea of, is it going to be a problem for the town in future situations if we explain, I think logically, that we had this opportunity to apply and we didn't want to lose the opportunity, but we can't slow down the project. And so I would like to ask our town manager if he thinks that there is likely to be retribution taken against a town that accepts a grant and then rejects it on the grounds that it costs more money than it provides.
Town manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I see this from a different perspective than at least what's been discussed. And while I appreciate the Library Building Committee's concern of the potential of this costing more, I guess doing the math, than $1 million if it slows up the schedule. And I'm not seeing where that should be the case. Now, the first scenario, based on everything that we know, if the town council supports this grant that has been submitted, which I would say that if we had not done the responsible thing for potential qualification and missed the deadline because of the technicality, I would be more concerned with that scenario. But in the case that we know, based on our bond council's determination, without further action by the town council, this $1 million would reduce the tax burden on Bloomfield neighbors. And so with that scenario in mind, that is of importance, given that we're going to get this library, both the libraries. So the opportunity to reduce the tax burden on Bloomfield neighbors is a significant factor. If it comes down to, and we choose, the town council determines for this to be an additional revenue source for the actual construction of the libraries, which could also be needed with inflationary factors still being what they are. The issue of the approval, and let's say that the approval doesn't come until a year from now. I don't see why that should hold up the schedule, because $1 million, as you'll recall, the town council has the ability, without having to go to a referendum. I think the number was 1.5 million. That's how we came up with the original bridge for keeping the square footage in. The town council has the ability to bridge the gap with funding if we don't have an answer on this $1 million because it's held up for whatever reason. We're not broke. We've got a fund balance of over $20 million at this point in time. So I see no scenario that having to wait for an answer on this grant application, that we would manage it so poorly that it's going to cost us. I would certainly recommend to the town council, if we don't have a timely answer on this grant and we need the $1 million for whatever reason, in town council, are we prepared to front the costs? I'm not a big advocate of hitting fund balance, but it is fund balance in the case of that we need it, particularly when we think it will be reimbursed. So I think we're looking to divide on something that it just doesn't make any sense to me. And maybe I'm getting worn down by divisiveness in Bloomfield. I say that very honestly. We're divided. We're divided in a lot of ways. And Lois, I'll get to your question, but I did have my hand up before you asked the question. So I'm hoping that the chair just hadn't seen it and recognized me.
That is correct. I apologize for that.
Now, I don't know the technical answer, but I trust what the library director has said. We don't always get everything in writing, but I have no reason to believe that our library director, who I trust, I believe board trusts, board of trustees, that she would be misrepresenting something that has been told her verbally. Neither do I see it as a reason that it should hold up, as the deputy mayor has said, for action by the town council at the next meeting, the September 28th meeting. We're not scheduled for any action items. Whether it would cause us to be looked upon in a negative way, I just can't even imagine. Why wouldn't the state look at us as having been honest brokers and making a request? And if it turned out for whatever reason that we didn't need the funds, I think that would be a plus from the state in its outlook towards Bloomfield. It's just my personal opinion. Can't tell you that I'm absolutely correct. That's the way I see it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I do want to clarify, just for your understanding, that we cannot move forward with any contracts on the McMahon project until, if we choose to accept that money, until that contract is signed with the state. So we couldn't bridge a gap and start the project. We would have to wait until we actually signed the contract for that grant to sign any other contracts for construction. So we do know that much. That's why there is the potential for delay here, which in fact costs us money on a couple different scales. One, just the time delay, and the other is separating it from the Prosser project, where we lose buying power and management power as well, those dollars. So, you know, the added cost is very real in that regard. But everything else is, you know, is why I believe, you know, this body needs to make a recommendation to town council. And that's what I'm looking for here from the building committee. Elizabeth, you have your hand up. You're at the top of the list here.
Yes, I wanted to reiterate from Maria's email that if we were on the bond commission December 9th agenda, we would be able to post for bid on December 19th. And as per Lois's request for what was in writing, yes, it was frowned upon previously. It could be frowned upon. We were still being it was still recommended for us to put the application forward. But since then, Maria put in writing, since 2 libraries have decided not to submit Category 1 grant requests this year after all, we expect to have sufficient funding to award all the eligible applications that we receive. Bloomfield's application and potential award will not adversely affect any other library's application, which would simply mean that the money would go back in the pot. And there would be no no's involved. So I, again, feel very confident in moving forward with this, with the timeline, and with the hope that it does work in our favor.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Lois?
I'll make a motion, which may need to be adjusted if I don't have all the details, but that the town council approve the submission of $1 million grant application to the state for the support of the McMahon project, with the understanding that if we cannot satisfy the, that if we do not receive the necessary contract with the state prior to our dates for issuing our own contracts, then this is a mess, I'm sorry. Can somebody make it better? That we will not proceed, and we will decline the $1 million grant in order to prevent our project from costing more.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, further discussion on that. Bob Berman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number one, if we go ahead and apply and later, and after we're awarded the money, but we don't have the contract, signed contract yet, and we want to go out to bid, we go out to bid, we are then in violation of the agreement before we even sign a contract. That to me spells trouble for the town of Bloomfield. And I'm very concerned about that. We cannot afford to wait past end of December, early January at the latest to go out to bid and still meet a timely manner in order to get these libraries completed in a time frame that we've all considered and we want to see, even knowing that we have supply chain issues now that we did not foresee way back, we weren't aware of. We know that costs are escalating, and no, they're not going down, they're still going up. Whether they're going up by 9% a year or not, I don't know the answer to, but they're going up by at least 4 to 5%. Everything I've heard, everything I've seen is telling me that. There are long lead times on virtually everything. I'm aware of some other projects in this town by private industry where they signed contracts over a year ago for solar panels as an example. And by the time Eversource got around to giving their approval, which was 5 months ago, now they can't get the panels till they don't know when. Simple issue on electronics and technology as an example. To put in a hybrid Zoom system in a synagogue I'm a member of, contract was signed a year ago. Everybody thought everything was going to be in time, in a timely manner. Well, all the materials coming in piecemeal, and over half of it's been back ordered, and we're still waiting. And the Jewish high holidays are coming up in another couple of weeks, and we don't know if we're going to be able to go ahead and have a hybrid meeting, hybrid holidays. These are the things that we're looking at and facing now, and they're not going to get much better. And I don't see any way in a timely manner, if the bond commission meets in December, early December even, and they say, okay, we're going to give you the money, we're going to have a contract from the state to be completed and approved and signed and sent back to them before the end of December. Because I'm just looking at the time frame from when everything happened for the Prosser grant. That contract was what, 2 months after approval? We finally got it. If they cut that down in half to 1 month, that still takes us past when we want to go out to bid. So I just don't see how it's even feasible. And I don't think the idea that it's not going to hurt the town of Bloomfield going forward, I'm sorry, I can't agree with that. To me, it's inconsiderate for the town to do this under those circumstances. Thank you.
I just want to clarify one thing you said, Bob, and that is, my understanding is we can go out to bid before this contract is signed. We cannot before the contract for the grant is signed. We cannot sign our own construction contracts until the grant construction contract is signed. So, you know, that's a detail, but it still buys us more time. I just, you know, I feel strongly here that everybody understands the cost of delay. Everybody understands the cost of separating the projects. But what we're really talking about here is whether or not rejecting or not accepting this state grant, if given to us, is a problem or isn't a problem. And I would suggest it's not the building committee's place. It's, you know, we are not the authorities seeking the grant. The town council and the town manager are seeking this grant. And I think that decision of whether to accept or reject the grant with our informed recommendation is their decision, you know, should it come to that over time. And so, you know, that's why I think this is a good motion, that we make it clear to the town council, we support going after this. However, there are circumstances where we're going to recommend not taking the money, and we have reasons, valid reasons for that. Ava.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for explaining that, because that was part of my point. That is precisely what the instructions do say. I would also reiterate that we now have in writing from the person who runs the program for the state, Connecticut Library, State Library, and for the bond program, with the recommendation from her and the library board of the state library to the bond commission, that we will know on December 9th, the bond commission's decision, and that 10 days later, the bids will go out. Those are the dates. If the state doesn't meet the dates, it's as simple as not taking the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava. More discussion. I don't see any more hands. All right, then let's call the vote on this motion. Nancy, would you do a roll call, please? It's really hard to see and hear everybody here.
Bob Ike,
Yes.
Lois Hager,
Yes,
Erica Coleman,
Yes.
Bob Berman.
No,
I think we have lost Dr. Bryant. So Mark Weissman.
Chair votes yes.
So that's 5-1. It passes.
Okay.
show Erica is still.
I'm
there.
sorry, we missed, yeah, I got Erica.
Two.
Jesse White. Jesse's
Oh,
not,
Jesse,
Jesse is left as well.
we have 4-1,
Sorry, you're correct, 4-1, yes,
4-1, which means the motion passes.
correct.
All right, I thank you, everybody. This is very complicated. But like I said, we're working in, as support to the town council, and this will be their decision on what transpires. So as long as we make our point clear to them where we stand, I think everything will go along for the best. Let's move on to committee reports. Elizabeth with outreach.
Yes, we were at Juneteenth and Celebrate Bloomfield, and we were sharing information about the library building committee and encouraging people to attend. And I know we will be at the Our Farm event that's upcoming. We're already in the stages of that. And we continue to share information in our newsletter and via social media.
Great. I'm really hoping that after we get positive results from the DD cost estimate, that we can really, really let loose here and be proud of what we have. I think it's a great project, and those renderings we saw at our last meeting were fantastic. So I'm looking forward to being able to share that with everybody positively. Now Leah is out as far as technology. Maybe, I don't know, Richard, can you update us just a little bit on where we are with technology from your perspective?
So from my perspective, we need to make sure that the bidders know where the devices are going to be located, where the phones are, where the computers are, where the printers are. Everything that's connected to the network needs to be located so that the bidders know where they are. And further, so that our consultants who are doing the conduit for those locations can illustrate them in the proper location. And we're hoping to get that by this point, but we have not. I know that there's a programming meeting on Tuesday morning, and technology is very often a subject of discussion during those programming meetings. I would like to be able to bring in a consultant to help identify these device locations. So I've called a consultant that we've worked with before. I think we need to discuss this a little bit further with the committee and maybe with that programming group. But we're facing a DD deadline, and I would like to give Downs as much information as we possibly can so they can prepare an accurate, as accurate a DD estimate as they can without guessing. And that's the part that makes me nervous. I said a minute ago, I'm a worrier, or I worry about stuff like this. And so the less uncertainty we have, the better off we'll all be. And that's what I'm struggling with right now, is the quantity and locations of these devices.
Okay, I think the concept of that makes a lot of sense. I mean, ultimately, Elizabeth and staff being the users and our experts, we need your input on all this. So anything we can do to help, we want to do. That's my attitude here, and especially with the loss of with our IT director in town, that's a big gap that we have to fill. So it sounds like bringing in another consultant here makes sense. So we keep moving, certainly not in place of user input. I mean, that's number one here.
Absolutely. The users have to be satisfied with what they're going to get. We
Right.
do their input, but I need someone to kind of gather all of that information and document it for bidders.
Okay, well, so you'll get something to us on that so we can
Yes,
have further discussions and in a timely way, right? Well,
yes, absolutely.
okay. All right. Let's see. Bob Berman, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. Going on with what you said and what Richard has raised, yeah. Unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to spend some more money on consultants that we didn't plan on. And it's gonna cost us something, but we don't have an option with the town's IT director leaving and the town IT staff being shorthanded to begin with. We're gonna need to bring a consultant in to help the library staff identify exactly where everything's gonna go, where all the wired connections are gonna be, and all the rest of that, because that's gotta be done quickly. And we can't afford to keep put that off. And the library staff, it's kind of stretched thin to begin with. Here's another unexpected expense, and that's why I'm not so sure we're going to be financially in a really good position going forward, even if we get all the CIF money. I don't know where we're going to stand, but we're going to have to spend more money on consultants than we planned, and the budget allowed for. And how much more, I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to end up having to do it.
All right, we'll have more information from Richard on that. And Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. We do have, and it's just Jeanette's been looking at it actually. We do have a spreadsheet with all the Cat 6, where we need the Cat 6, how many we need. We don't have it exactly like a drawing where it's going to go. So I think we can discuss that at the next meeting, what more detail we're going to need. And then there's things that are beyond my my expertise when it comes to maybe the placement of the access points, things like that, where either a consultant or we have to get our deputy IT director involved more now, because he can help weigh in with that. So I think on Tuesday, we have a meeting on Tuesday. I hope we can kind of iron this out, but we'll go back over some of the spreadsheet. I have all the equipment listed, how many PCs we need, how many phones, all that. So we do have a lot of it, but we don't have all of it.
All right, thanks, Chris, and thanks for all your work on this. Like I said, don't hesitate. When there's things that are beyond your reach, we're all trying to get it done. So, and the pressure is on to get it done now. Let's see. Any other comments on technology? All right. So let's go to Nancy. Purchases, approval of purchases. Nancy, you're muted.
I'm going to combine a purchase and an invoice together.
Okay.
And that would be the Mdc encroachment permit that Richard talked about earlier, and we need to move forward. So in order for them to begin the process, we need to send a check of $540. So I'm going to ask permission that we move forward, number one, with the encroachment permit process, and number two, that we authorize the purchase of the expenditure of $540 for that purpose, so that the design team can move forward with obtaining the encroachment permit.
I'll
We have a
move,
motion.
move approval of both expenditures.
Second,
Moved by Lois, seconded by Bob Berman. Thank you very much. Any other discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands or say aye if you don't have a hand to see.
Aye.
And do we have, Erica, did you raise your hand or say aye?
Yeah, aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right.
And
Then anybody opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
we have
Nancy?
one more invoice for SLR. This is for some, I believe it's the Prosser Riley. Hold on, sorry. Their invoices are not the easiest to read. Phase 2, this is the remainder of phase 2 at
and Riley.
The
Yeah.
Riley, top
the
of page.
Riley lot, yes, for $1,406.80.
So
Motion
move.
approved. Moved by Bob Berman.
Second.
Second by Bob Igue. Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, raise your hands. Erica, say aye if you're in favor. Erica, you there? Not hearing Erica.
I'm not either.
She's not muted.
No, she's not.
No. Erica, we need your vote here.
I'm sorry, I missed it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
And
you
now
now.
we can. We've got
Okay.
a motion to approve invoice to SLR $1,406.80. If you approve, please say aye.
Okay, aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes. Thank you very much. Nancy, what else?
That's it.
Okay. All right, we have next two regular meetings, the 21st of this month and October 5th. I will not be here for the October 5th meeting.
Neither will I. It's a Jewish holiday.
All right, please let us know if you can't make either meeting. And so we're on to comments from the committee members. Lois.
I'm just wondering whether we will have something about the commissioning agent at the next meeting. Will that be on the agenda? Will we have an RFP draft by then?
Yes, there will be an RFP draft.
Thank you.
Bob Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comment is that I know the library staff is working very hard on a lot of different things, but one of the things they really need to do and do in a relatively quick time frame, actually with the ASAP, as of the need really should have had it by the end of August, which we don't have, is what furniture and what bookcases, et cetera, are they plan to put in the swing space? How many computers and how many, and what kind, and how many tables and things to hold the computers they plan to put in over at Belk, because we're negotiating that lease as well. We need that information quickly, because we can't keep going forward wondering what we're going to be doing and how much is going to be in what and what space. So we really need you to get that information to Chris and I, either one of us or both of us, as quickly as you can, because at the same time too, we need to know what's going into storage and what kind of stuff and how much stuff you're going to want to have access to, because as Chris said, we're gonna have to find another alternative in Meyer if you want to be able to get us stuff along the way during the swing space utilization. And tempus fugit. I mean, time is running quickly, and if everything's going to come together so that we get these spaces in January, and we're going to have everything set up for you to move into by the middle of February, we got to have that information. And if Chris and I don't have that information, it can't happen. And we have, we're relying on the library staff to give us that information because we can't figure it out. There's no way we can. We don't have that expertise. We don't we can't read your mind. We don't know what you're thinking. So you really need to get that to us quickly. And please, we need your help on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Elizabeth, I assume that's in process. I see you have your hand up too.
Yes, I wanted to note that I was omitted from the agenda this evening. I also wanted to note that when I was away 2 weeks ago, the director's report was also omitted from the agenda. I did send an email to the chair asking that the assistant directors, Allison and Chris, speak in my stead, and they were never given the platform to do so. So I wanted to bring that up. We have been working tirelessly on so many things, and we are feeling beaten down with all of these deadlines, but we are trying our best. That being said, hearing that Bob needs all this information does feel a little bit like gaslighting, in that we also need information. I know that we have questions about the storage spaces. I'm not sure why we were not invited to tour and ask questions at Meyer with Chip and Bob when they went. Not finding out information after we go through all of these processes that changes the recommendations we make just adds to our workload. So I really want to ask that there's more information sharing about this. I know, Bob, we're also still waiting on what hours BELC would work for a swing space. I'm concerned that the hours will not work, in which case we should revisit the Blue Hills Fire Department to see if that would be better for our community. We continue to see an uptick in use of McMahon-Wittenberry, and we want to have as much continuation of service throughout this process as possible. I would also like to request that the timelines that Downs shows be included in the documents that are shared with the entire committee. As we know, not all committee members are always present, and those dates and timelines are so important, as well as for the library. And those timelines, there was a new one today with the bid dates, now it's saying we're going to move in February. We need that information, and I know we are resorting to taking screenshots to get that and document that. Those timelines should be shared with all relevant stakeholders so that everybody knows what's going on. About the state library, I wanted to let everybody know that we just received another grant from the state library to help digitize some World War II era materials in our history collection. This is important as we are talking about the history collection and how much it can hold in terms of access and digitizing things in the future, so that that space that we are designing in Prosser will stand the test of time. We continue to meet with TSKP and SLR, and I know Glenn from Public Works has met with RZ Design. We continue to have a lot of conversations to try to make sure that we're meeting all of those information requests as soon as possible. I also wanted to note that as far as the scrim and the externals at both buildings, the state construction grant does require certain signage that points out to the state library board and the governor. And then finally, I wanted to point out that in order for this project to be successful, we really all need to work together. I'm concerned that this meeting time may not be the best meeting time as we continue to have issues with everybody being able to attend at this time. I know 6 o'clock is hard for me in terms of picking up my kids, having dinner, making sure they're taken care of. Maybe we could look at a later time or a different date. In order for us to be as visionary as we want to be and forward thinking so that we build libraries that stand the test of time. I think it's important that we continue to share information across all the stakeholders. I know I try my best to report out and be as transparent as possible. And I hope that everybody that's a part of this process can work to continue in that fashion as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Bob, I'll come back to you. Is there anybody else from the committee? Bob, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The timeline of January 1st, getting the swing space available has been there for 4 months now. Number one. Number two, what I've asked you for tonight is the same thing I've been asking since March. So it's anything new. That's all I have to say.
Okay, it's clear everybody needs to play together nicely so we get this project done in a pleasant manner, I hope. These projects can be a lot of fun, really. Trust me, been through many, many of them. Nancy, you had your hand up next.
Yes, I just wanted to report that Public Works and I met today with a energy consultant that we have available to us through our membership in the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. And it looks like it's going to be very promising regarding both the solar panels for both locations as well as the EV station. So I'll report more when I have it, but it looks like it's a great opportunity for the town and for the project.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Lois?
I'm sorry, I had one more thing I wanted to ask about. When we worked on the elementary schools, there was some requirement that we have art in them. And I don't know whether that was because of those grant sources, but at some point, I hope we can talk about whether or not that's a requirement. And if it is, and even if it's not, what sort of art could make these buildings even more beautiful?
Good point, Lois. Thank you. Richard, is that something you can report back to us on as we go forward?
I can report back to you. To my knowledge, there's no art requirement, but I will confirm this. Unlike some Connecticut projects that get state funding, there is a 1% for art requirement. I don't believe that's the case here, but I will confirm. My only suggestion regarding art is that you do not accept donations for art without first having a committee review that art to see if it's appropriate.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members? Okay, I see none. So let's, Nancy, public comment. Do we have members of the public with the hand up?
Yes, we do. The first one is Marshall Rulnick. Go ahead, Marshall.
Hi, I am very shocked that you are having a meeting on October 5th, as Bob alluded to, that which is the holiest day of the year for Jewish people. And I don't believe you would do it if it were Easter or Christmas or any other important non-Jewish holiday. I just think it's totally wrong. And I think as a citizen of Bloomfield in this country, that that they should be changed.
Thank you. Anybody else with their hand up? Nancy, I don't see any.
I don't see any either.
All right. Well, I thank you all from the public for attending. Thank you, everybody, for your patience in getting this going. We all know how important it is to get a quorum together. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved,
moved.
Mr. Chairman.
Second.
By Bob, second by Bob Berman, all in favor? Raise your hands. Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.